Now, joining me in the studio is our international affairs commentator, Doug Herbert, and also is Professor Hilary INGHAM, an economist at Lancaster University in the UK. Thanks to both of you. Doug, let me start with you. Why is the Red Sea so critical to global shipping?
Well, it's one of the world's biggest maritime trade channels. And in this particular case, as we've been saying, we heard in that report, it is about 12%, right? 12% of all global trade. But perhaps even more importantly, it's about 30%, nearly a third of the global container traffic. You know, those giant containers that we see piled up at docks around the world. So, when we're talking about needed supplies, major necessities, it is a major transshipment point. But more importantly, the area that we're sort of focusing on, we're saying Red Sea, and it's sort of like, the umbrella term we're using, but the actual focus here of these attacks is on a narrow strait at the southern entrance leading into the Red Sea, right? At the southern end, you have a strait, the Bab al-Mandeb. Maybe we could bring up a map and show our viewers. And it's that area. It's very narrow. It's off the coast of Yemen and right between Yemen and Djibouti on Africa's coast. And you could see there, it's about no more than 30 kilometers, about 20 miles, just over 20 miles wide. It's very, very narrow. And in order to get into the Red Sea, for those ships to make their way up towards the Suez Canal, which is the northernmost part of the Red Sea, they have to navigate those drones and ballistic missiles coming through. So right now you have a situation, and you remember whenever you have shipping blocked on the Red Sea or a part of the Red Sea, whether it's the strait or a canal, and we remember the Suez Canal, the giant ship being blocked there back in 2021, there was about $10 billion a day in global commerce that was being lost just because ships couldn't get through. That's why right now we are all concentrating and our eyes are riveted because of the security situation around that narrow little entranceway to the Red Sea that those ships must navigate to make that crossing from Asia onwards to Europe.
At this point, let me bring in Professor INGHAM from Lancaster University. Professor, what are going to be the direct consequences of this blockade or problem, not to mention the long term, given those ships are effectively sitting ducks, aren't they, in those waters? I'm sorry, Professor, I think you've pressed your mute button. I'm going to try and ask you the question again. What will be the long-term consequences of all this?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, sorry. Well, I think it's what happens to these ships. I mean, if they actually manage to go through this narrow entrance, as was being discussed, the first thing is that these cargoes and the ships themselves are insured, and the insurance companies are putting up the price. So previously, it was about 0.07% of the value of the ship and the cargo. That could go up by as much as 10%. Now, what a lot of these carriers have said they're going to do, BP and Maersk in particular, they're going to take an alternative route. So they're going to go around the Cape of Good Hope, i.e. they're going around South Africa. Now, the implication of that is it adds 2 weeks to their journey time. So obviously adding that on is going to add to the cost of transportation, which is going to add to the cost of the goods they're actually delivering. And that is going to work its way all the way through the supply chain.
Doug, perhaps we need to remind our audience why the Houthis are indeed carrying out these attacks, because if you look at that map, it's a long way from Gaza, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the Houthis, I mean, look, what it boils down to is what are they trying to do, Annette? They're trying to get regional street cred. And what do I mean by that? They're right now in a region where they say that this is basically a show of support, these attacks, for their Palestinian allies, for the Palestinians under Israeli bombardment in Gaza. And from their perspective, they see the other Arab leaders around the region. Remember, they're not the leadership. They're not the officially recognized government. They are a rebel group that has been battling the internationally recognized government. But what they see is they say they are the true supporters of the Palestinians. They say the other Arab leaders have been going to all these international forums, paying lip service to support for the Palestinian cause, when in effect, they're really just lackeys of the West, Israel and its Western allies. They're not really supporting the Palestinians. So these attacks are meant to be sort of literally a shot across the bow to the international community to say, yeah, we're the real supporters of the Palestinians. And this is also a shot across the bow to Israel, that is, as from the Houthi perspective, the ones who are guilty, Israel and the U.S., of waging this offensive, this horrific war against their Palestinian allies. Remember, the slogan of the Houthis is death to America, death to Israel. They're trying to do it. And also along the way, if they happen to gain more legitimacy on the home front, where they've consolidated control of most of North Yemen, and in order to, going ahead, try to further consolidate their control, this will help as well if they were seen at the time of distress really being the ones who backed the Palestinians.
But they are backed by Iran, which is another critical element, isn't it?
They're Iranian proxies, at least they are accused thereof. Now, they would, Hezbollah, Iran, they have denied aiding, abetting in any way the Houthis along the way. But the West has time and again come up with, intelligence has come up with what they say is incontrovertible evidence that the Houthis have greatly benefited from both weapons and technology provided by Iran, and via Iran, Hezbollah as well in Lebanon.
Professor, what impact is this going to have on the oil market?
Well, I think the danger is that the oil and natural gas prices are going to rise. And of course, with many countries around the globe fighting inflation, this is going to be another threat in their efforts to reduce the rate of inflation.
Doug, what impact is this having on the region in general? I mean, it's interesting to note in that coalition, the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates are certainly not members, are they?
Yeah, and you could sort of try to divine what would be the reasons that the Saudis, remember the Houthis had been waging until a ceasefire back in September 2022, they had been waging an intense war against a Saudi-led coalition with the Saudis and the UAE that the UN said had given rise to the world's greatest humanitarian crisis. Much of the population on the verge of starvation. So why would the Saudis and the UAE be sitting out? They don't want to be seen. This is one avenue of speculation. They don't want to be seen as doing anything that could be seen as supporting Israel. That is, by joining a coalition to protect against or to fend off Houthi ballistic missile and drone attacks, they could be seen as somehow weighing in, tilting the balance on the side of Israel in this war. So in the sense of perhaps coming across as more neutral or not wanting to be seen in that light, they're staying out of this coalition. I'll also note that the coalition, even though we were talking about this earlier, the trade routes go from Asia to Europe, but you don't have players such as China in the coalition either. It's 10 nations, and for now it's predominantly European nations, along with the Seychelles, and I'm forgetting who the others are, in Canada as well. Yeah.
Professor Ingham, clearly, given what we're experiencing now in the Red Sea, it's a reminder of the fragility of that part of the world. The fact it is indeed a key shipping route. So what can be done to protect this key route? I mean, is there anything on a global level? Are there any measures that can be imposed?
It's difficult to really see an answer. I mean, obviously, we've got this coalition that's come together. But, as has just been said, there's a lot of nations not involved in that. I mean, this is a very volatile region. Historically, it's been the same as well. There hasn't been an answer before, and it's not overtly clear that there is one now.
Professor Ingham from Lancaster University, we're going to have to leave it there. And thank you also to Doug Herbert, our international affairs commentator.